Greetings and salutations. Before anything, can we please appreciate my sweater? It says, I'm sorry I have this clothes today. I love it. It's one of my favorite things I own and I feel like people should appreciate it more. So, I saw Spider-Man No Way Home 2 nights ago. Have I recovered? Absolutely not. I keep bursting into tears about it. Very cool, very fun. I will probably do a full spoiler review kind of video just to rant about it after I see it a second time tomorrow. But for now, I thought, seeing as I've officially seen every Spider-Man movie that has been released into the world so far, I would do a video ranking all of them based on my personal opinions, so please don't yell at me. Pre-warning, there will be spoilers about No Way Home in this video, but only when I'm discussing where I rank No Way Home and why, and I will put a little thingy on the screen to say when to skip ahead if you don't want spoilers, and I will only say spoilers in that. So you can skip them if you want to. So we're gonna go from worst to best. So starting in at the bottom of the list, number 9 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I feel like is pretty obvious. Here's the thing about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is I don't hate all of it. There are some parts of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that I actually really love. It has some of my favorite Spider-Man moments ever, but as a whole, it's not good. Andrew is my favorite Spider-Man personally, so I just enjoy his performance here, and I think every scene with Peter and Gwen here is phenomenal. I think that Andrew and Emma have the best on-screen chemistry in any Spider-Man film, and I do think they're the most dynamic and interesting on-screen Spider-Man love interest duo, I suppose. I personally really love the ground rule scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in any Spider-Man movie. This also has my favorite swinging scene, the opening of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, not the plane crash, the opening where he starts swinging and you start with a shot of him above and you just have the logo and it pans out and he's falling. No idea where he's falling from, but that's my favorite swinging scene in any Spider-Man movie. I really love the little montage of him being Spider-Man when he's got a cold. I think that's really charming and feels very accurate to the character. I really like some of the scenes where he's trying to trick Aunt May into not knowing that it's Spider-Man. The I was cleaning the chimney. We don't have a chimney. What? And I was washing the American flag. I love those moments, but as a whole, this movie is just jam-packed with so much bullshit. I hate the storyline of Peter Parker was the chosen one all along and stuff with it. I don't like when we focus too much on his parents in general. I don't have a necessarily super bad time watching any Spider-Man movie, but this one is definitely the most difficult to get through, because while there are stuff that I really love, there's 20-25 minutes of stuff that I really love in this movie, and then everything else I hate. Why the fuck is there a secret subway train? Why is Gone playing when he's fucking researching his parents? This goddamn movie. In 8th place we have Spider-Man 3. This immediately is a step up for me, because while I don't think this movie is very good, there is at no point in this movie that I'm having a bad time. I think this movie has a lot of good shit in it. It's just when you put it all together, it's a bit of a mess. But I pretty much enjoy every scene that happens. Obviously, I don't think Venom's great, but I think Topher Grace's Eddie Brock is perfect. I really enjoy when he's just being Eddie. It's just when he's Venom. The plot with Harry having amnesia is fucking insane. New Goblin is the worst thing to ever happen in the same Raimi films, and it makes me laugh. When he fucking gets clotheslined on the webs and he just really hits the ground, it makes me laugh. I mean, Peter Parker being evil, taken over by the symbiote, is one of the funniest things to ever be put on film, especially in a Spider-Man movie. I am not having a bad time watching Spider-Man 3. I really hate Sam Raimi MJ. Sometimes bad things happen to her and I'm kind of I'm a horrible person, I'm aware. I do feel very bad for her when Peter Parker kisses Gwen Stacy in front of her, does a Spider-Man kiss Gwen in front of her and thinks that that's okay. I actually have a lot of fun with Spider-Man 3. I just do think as a whole it's very all over the place, and oh my god, I love the Sandman stuff, but as a whole it's very all over the place and the pacing is insane and there's too many villains here, but you know what? It's very fun. In 7th place, I feel like this is lower than most people, we have Spider-Man Homecoming. I love this film a lot, a lot. I actually think this is a very well made film, and I really do like Tom as Peter Parker. The thing about Spider-Man Homecoming for me is that it doesn't necessarily feel that great of a Spider-Man movie, if that makes any sense. The MCU version of Peter Parker and Tom's Peter Parker is very different to comic Peter Parker. His origin story is a very different thing. He exists in his own universe, and I am fine with that, and I find just looking at the character as a separate thing, in Homecoming especially. And I like the story arc of kind of having Peter learn that he can't rely too much on Tony Stark and Tony Stark's tech, even though subsequent Tom appearances kind of forget that lesson. Probably one of my favorite scenes in any Spider-Man movie, in the top 3 easy, is him stuck under the rubber and he sounds like a kid, he's calling for help like a kid. I think the reflection of his face versus Spider-Man, I know that it's a comic parallel, but I think it's a bit much, but I love that scene a lot. It makes me cry every time I watch it. and I love Zendaya in this film. She's barely in it, but I love all the brief looks at Michelle that we get here. It's just that this film, until the final battle, and there is a reason why like my favorite MCU Peter Parker suit is the homemade suit, and it's because it's the one that feels most organically Spider-Man. I don't enjoy having Peter rely so heavily on Tony for so much of this. I don't like that the villain is someone motivated by Tony Stark, and I really don't like the Stark suit, and I don't like how much of this is centered around like him being in the suit with, I really don't like Karen being in the suit, because at that point it begs the question of like, does this character need to be Peter Parker? Does this character need to have been bitten by a spider, or is he just in an Iron Man suit that looks like Spider-Man? And it takes away some of the fun for me. I don't like that all of the gadgets are from Tony Stark. I understand that works narratively in the universe, and I have no problem with that, but it makes it a bit less fun for me personally. In sixth place, we have The Amazing Spider-Man. I think Homecoming is a better film than The Amazing Spider-Man, but I kind of think The Amazing Spider-Man is a better Spider-Man film. I don't know if that makes sense. The Amazing Spider-Man is a film where, again, Andrew is my favorite Peter, even though I think he's in the worst movies. He feels very comic accurate to me in how I interpret the character in the comics. I love the concept of the story they're going for here. I don't think the execution is great, but I love the concept of a Spider-Man story where Spider-Man is learning that he doesn't have to avenge Uncle Ben, he has to honor him. Getting to see him really learn that with great power comes great responsibility moral over the course of the film, rather than just having like him kind of learn it in an instance after Uncle Ben, having it really develop over time, and him having to really lose a lot and to be a fuck up for a lot of this story in order to learn that lesson. I really love that concept. I don't love how it's done, but I love the idea of that. And again, just, oh my goodness, the Emma and Andrew stuff is phenomenal. Their chemistry is insane. Every scene of them is so interesting, so dynamic. I really like how they portray Captain Stacy here. He's very, very reminiscent of like Ultimate Captain Stacy, which I enjoy. The bridge scene is, again, probably in my top 3 Spider-Man scenes of all time. Honestly, it's probably my top 3 Spider-Man scenes in live action is probably Tom's Peter stuck under the rubble, the bridge scene in The Amazing Spider-Man, and then, you know, the train scene with Tobey. And I love that that's the first moment we really see him be Spider-Man. I like how far into the film that is. I think it's just, I think that scene's brilliant. I love a lot of the action scenes here. I love the choreography of Spider-Man specifically. He really moves like a spider, and I really just enjoy that. I think that's very, very like accurate to the character. Again, this movie has flaws, but I really love this one, and I think I am quite nostalgic for it because it was the first Spider-Man movie that I saw like in theaters and stuff, so I'm gonna have a little bit of nostalgia for it too. In 5th place, we have Spider-Man Far From Home. I feel like even people who love MCU Peter Parker rank Homecoming higher. Far From Home for me kind of fixes some problems that I have with Homecoming. We don't really have Karen in the suit because we don't have that suit for most of it. He has just him in civilian clothes, or the night monkey suit, which obviously doesn't have any AI in it, and the black and red suit that he builds later in the film doesn't have an AI in it either, which I enjoy. I love him not even having his web shooters at the end, like really seeing Peter Parker just learn how to be Peter Parker, bringing back in the Spidey sense and giving a reason for the absence of Spidey sense in Homecoming, because we saw it in Civil War and then it just wasn't in Homecoming, which was a bit odd. But I love the Peter and MJ stuff. I like that we're focusing more on MJ. I love Michelle Jones as a character. I really do. I really like MJ in the comics, but she's not a character I can relate to at all. And Michelle Jones, like MCU MJ, feels like a character I can relate to, and so I have a stronger emotional connection to her. I was always more of a Gwen than an MJ, and so having like an MJ that I feel closer to is kind of cool. And I think Zendaya is incredible, and I think her and Tom have really good chemistry as well. And I love that their love story is so accurate to teenagers and accurate to like awkward 16-year-olds, like them really fumbling around their first kiss and just fumbling around being able to talk to each other. I love that. We see a little bit of it in Homecoming, but we grow a lot stronger and harder with the concept of like the classic Spider-Man story of like, I want to stay and talk to the girl I like, but I have responsibilities and duties that I have to run off and do. We see that very, very intensely in like the opera scene where him and MJ are talking about sitting next to each other, and then he has to run out, and then Brad kind of walks over and flips him off, and Peter like goes to sit down, but Nick Fury's in his ear, and it's like, come on. I really like that. That feels very true to Spider-Man to me. I really love Mysterio. He's my favorite Spider-Man villain ever, and I thought he was really, really well done here. I like what they did with him and like the mocap soup and blending him into the universe, and I think Jake Gyllenhaal was phenomenal in the role. I know we don't like Jake Gyllenhaal, but he was really fucking good as Mysterio. It's okay to admit that he's good at his job. Like, I actually really love this, and some scenes that people seem to have a lot of problem with, I really enjoyed. Like, a lot of people were like, you know, the scene with the drone coming in from outer space feels like a Disney Channel movie. That's the point. The John Watts Spider-Man movies are meant to feel like classic teen coming of age movies mixed in with some Spider-Man stuff, and I think that they do that very, very well, and that is the point of it. I cannot tell you how much I laughed the first time I was in the cinema, and you have the scene of Peter being like, Brad has a photo of me in his phone? Is Brad a target? Yeah, Brad's a target. Then it cuts to outer space and there's this giant fucking drone coming in. That's so funny to me. I love that. I think this is a really fun movie. I think it's really charming, and it does fix a lot of problems that I had with, not necessarily problems, but things that made Homecoming a bit less fun for me and feel a bit less Spider-Man-y. We get a swinging scene finally. In fourth place, we have Spider-Man. Original origin story, Sam Raimi, 2002 Spider-Man. Tobey is not my favorite Peter Parker or Spider-Man. He does a very good job in these films, but he doesn't feel definitively like my Spider-Man. Like, he doesn't feel kind of how I interpret the characters in like comics and cartoons, which is where I fell in love with the character. But I think he's great here, and I think the Sam Raimi films, despite Tobey not being my favorite Spider-Man, they just understand the character so fundamentally. I think Raimi Spider-Man villains are unmatched as well, and I like that all of the villains are really good parallels to and foils to Tobey's Peter Parker, and the Green Goblin in this film is a perfect example of that. You see this because you kind of jump between them having very similar experiences scene by scene, where you jump between these two characters who are given like necessarily superpowers, and you see someone who was corrupted by the power of that versus Peter, who was grounded by the responsibility of that. I really love that. I actually think the chemistry between Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst is the best in this film, and some of the dialogue is really cringy, but I enjoy that, if I'm honest, and I think that the chemistry is really, really solid here. I love how campy the Raimi films are. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is one of my favorite on-screen villains of all time. I think he is just so brilliant in this role. He's so fucking perfect for it. I don't think James Franco was good in these movies, but I enjoy that he seems insane in all of them. Oh my god, like the scene at Thanksgiving with Norman and with Peter, the tension there is insane. I think these films are brilliant, and I think they are such perfect Spider-Man stories. Sam Raimi understands the character and his inner dilemmas and the moral of with great power comes great responsibility so well, and that's why I think these movies are so beloved, because they really capture the essence of Spider-Man. Even if you don't like Tobey, I think they do really capture the essence of Spider-Man, and I love how like unabashedly like comic book silly they are, which I think I don't hate that the MCU doesn't do, because I think audiences would respond, you know, differently to it now. I think these movies are a bit too cheesy. People would criticize how cheesy they are if they were made now, but it's really charming looking back, and yeah, I really love this film. In third place, we have Spider-Man 2. I don't feel like I have to elaborate on this. Like, I actually don't. I think we all understand perfectly why Spider-Man 2 is as brilliant as it is, and why it's such a powerful film, and why so many people still hold it in such high regard. I think we all get it. It's just fantastic and brilliant, and this movie really understands who Spider-Man is, and it builds on everything that Sam Raimi built in the first one, and this is, in my opinion, one of the best sequels ever too. In second place, we have No Way Home. So I'm gonna talk for some time with spoilers, skip ahead this amount of time, I'll put it in editing to avoid spoilers. So I think No Way Home is a perfect Spider-Man story too. It fixes every problem that I had with MCU Peter. His financial struggles, him always having Stark Tech building his suit, him not tapping into some of the deeper parts of Peter Parker's rage and anger, and the darker aspects of his character that I think make him so interesting and dynamic and relatable and grounded. They tap into all of those. They actually have him in a very, very real, very literal sense, have his Uncle Ben moment, have his with great power comes great responsibility moment. And this entire film is just such a love letter to the character, obviously with Andrew and Tobey's inclusion. Like, I cannot tell you how much I cried seeing this movie in the theater, because every interaction between the three of them was everything that I wanted it to be. This film was somehow everything that I wanted it to be, and it was fan servicey, but in a way that felt very lovely and fun, and I wasn't mad about any of it. There are some scenes where I was like, okay, this is going on for a bit long, this is pure fan service, but it was good fan service, and it wasn't like the whole film was riddled with it, so I was just enjoying it when it happened. The way that they have every character be introduced and brought into the universe is a very, very smart way of doing it. I think showing Tom's sympathy for the villains and his naivety to try and save them all is such a beautiful representation of that character and what he stands for, and then having him lose May over it, and having especially Toby, but Andrews as well, Peter, coaching him through that and making sure that he doesn't give in to the rage, especially with Andrews, Peter, who kind of says that he got bitter and he started pulling his punches. I think it's just such a beautiful story, and it really shows that John Watts does understand this character and that Tom is perfect for this role, and they were building to this. I think Homecoming and Far From Home were absolutely building to this, and I think they did kind of, it feels like they led the character down a different road on purpose to have this really be where he becomes Spider-Man at the end of his trilogy. He becomes the Spider-Man that we all know and love, because his circumstances were different and it took him a bit longer to get here. I'm in love with this film. I think No Way Home is the best live action Spider-Man film we've ever had. I really do. And in first place is Into the Spider-Verse. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think anything will ever top this film for me. I think Into the Spider-Verse really does understand Spider-Man as a character, not just Peter Parker, but what wearing the mask means and what it represents. And I love the message of anyone can wear the mask. I love how they represent Gwen. I love how they represent Miles especially. I love the idea of just anyone being able to wear the mask and anyone being able to grow into the suit if they have that desire to help people, and if they take that leap of faith, and if they take on that responsibility. I think Into the Spider-Verse is just a beautiful film, and it's so moving, and I have such an emotional connection to it. And I think I'm like an animation nerd as well, so it's very groundbreaking in terms of animation. It's just a pure piece of art, and so I am going to be a little bit biased to that because I am an animation nerd, and like I do love that stuff, and I do love the technical side of all of that. Everything about Into the Spider-Verse is such a love letter to the character in the most beautiful way, I think. I don't know, I love Into the Spider-Verse a lot. Anyway, that's my ranking of Spider-Man movies. Comment your ranking below. I'm really intrigued because I think some people rank them on what they actually think are technically the best movies. Some people rank them solely on personal preference. Some people rank them on what they think is the best Spider-Man movie. I'm really intrigued by other people's opinions and how they place them and how other people interpret the character, because I think with a character like Spider-Man, where we've seen so many incarnations of him and he's been around for so long, whether it's in just the movies or it's with the comics or with the cartoons or with like anything, there's such a history there and everyone interprets the character so differently. And that's why I don't like the idea of there being like a one best actor for Spider-Man, because it depends on how you personally interpret the character and your emotional connection to him. So talk to me about Spider-Man. I would really like that if you wanted to. Thank you very much for watching. I love you, and I'll see you very soon. Mwah.